person who treats you or the situation that you're in, whatever it is so negative that that's the thing that makes you feel love, makes you feel sentiment. In other words, why that situation? And then we have the death of all reason sometimes, which comes right after that. A person will say, I don't know, it's too much thinking. But unless you figure out what those unconscious motivations in you are, in other words, unless you bring the unconscious up into the conscious, then we're going to do what we've always done. And then we're going to call it fate. That's just the way I am. Yeah, but why? There's a reason for it. And unless you figure out why we are the way that we are, then you're always going to do the things that you've always done. But it won't have been a choice. It'll be like you're pre-programmed, like a simulation. But you're not the main character now. You're the NPC. You get programmed by genetics. We get programmed by family and friends around us. We get programmed by early influence. We get programmed by school. We get programmed by media. And unless we recognize the programming that's going on, well then we aren't going to actually ever be able to actually author ourselves to be the main character, certainly in our own lives.
Like, for example, the religion thing, where they believe that God's controlled the weather. Now, they said that to make sense of something that they didn't yet know. So that's what they believe. But now we would look at that, or some of us would look at that, and then we would say, no, there's actually a scientific reason behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that there's I guess a segment of people who don't really want to know things? They just want to believe things. Why do you think they'd want that to be the case?
They don't like the truth.
Yeah, why not? Why wouldn't they like the truth?
Because maybe it's just something that they don't agree with, or they don't want to be true, so they just kind of distract themselves.
So what's something that we can get heavy. What's something that people would not want to know the truth about, or would want to believe, because it's more comfortable for them?
Like you can trick yourself into thinking you're in a good relationship and you're not.
So maybe they want to believe that they're in a
Healthy relationship.
Yeah, in a healthy relationship. So perhaps people want to trick themselves into believing that they're in a healthy relationship. None of us, of course, but people we know maybe want to believe that they're in a healthy relationship. And if somebody comes along and tells them the truth about it, then it angers them. Why would people want to believe something like that when it's not true?
Because it's easier to just make a delusion than to solve the problem that you don't want is true.
Yeah. So he's saying that maybe it's easier to live a delusion than to solve a problem. So it might be harder to solve the problem. Yeah. We're going to start reading some texts that look into what that problem might be with people and why it is that they pursue those relationships. They try to kind of force themselves into believing something like that. In other words, there's a reason for it. There's a logic for everything. There's a reason that people do everything. The reasons will operate at two different levels. You're going to have a conscious level, and then, in other words, those are the things that you're aware of. You're walking across the street, and you see a car headed towards you, so you jump out of the way. You responded to something consciously. You saw the threat, and then you responded to it. But you'll also respond to things unconsciously. You won't know why you did the things that you do. We've talked a little bit about this so far, but for example, like if someone's in an unhealthy relationship, however it is that we define that, the question might be, well, you know it's bad, right? Yeah, so then why do you stay in it? I don't know, and then we don't know what to say, so we'll say something like, I just love them a lot. Yeah, but why? In other words, what is it about a person who treats you or the situation that you're in, whatever it is so negative that that's the thing that makes you feel love, makes you feel sentiment. In other words, why that situation? And then we have the death of all reason sometimes, which comes right after that. A person will say, I don't know, it's too much thinking. But unless you figure out what those unconscious motivations in you are, in other words, unless you bring the unconscious up into the conscious, then we're going to do what we've always done. And then we're going to call it fate. That's just the way I am. Yeah, but why? There's a reason for it. And unless you figure out why we are the way that we are, then you're always going to do the things that you've always done. But it won't have been a choice. It'll be like you're pre-programmed, like a simulation. But you're not the main character now. You're the NPC. You get programmed by genetics. We get programmed by family and friends around us. We get programmed by early influence. We get programmed by school. We get programmed by media. And unless we recognize the programming that's going on, well then we aren't going to actually ever be able to actually author ourselves, to be the main character, certainly in our own lives. We can delude ourselves into thinking that we are. And that's one of the things that's so striking, by the way, about the simulation theory that we're looking at. It's a subtle point, but when we think like, well, if this was a simulation, I would know it. But think about how much about ourselves we don't know. We don't know why we believe the things that we believe a lot of times. We don't know why we respond the way that we do to things. Why do I get mad so quickly? Or how come I can't bring myself to be angry at this one person who so clearly deserves it? Why is it that I'm so much more forgiving of other people than I am of myself? Or why am I so much more forgiving of myself than I am of other people? Both directions. Why is it that, here's a good example. Why is it that I'll have students who I'll ask them quite honestly, why are you here? Students are failing a bunch of things. They're getting in trouble. They're not paying attention. They're just got stuff stuck in their ears and they're listening to something that has nothing to do with school. So then why are you bothering to get here in school? What's the point? My mom makes me. Okay, so what? Why don't you just tell your mom no? Why not be the author of yourself and do that? Well, because, and then you have to kind of examine yourself to see why is it that I'm the kind of person who would just so easily just kind of be shifted around like this. And so that goes to what we're looking at right now in this article with the simulation theory. Is it possible we're just programmed by things that are so far outside of our understanding? Because until you, again, bring that unconscious motivation up into the conscious, until you know why you do the things that you do, you're just going to call it fate and do what we've always done. And then you're never going to actually own anything of yourself, of your own ideas. And we'll think that we do. And people will actually, with a straight face, say, no, I make my own decisions. I'm an individual. Well, they act like everyone else, talk like everyone else, dress like everyone else, think like everyone else, get their information, ideas from all the same places, and walk around, even though we look subtly different, still behave like a swarm. And being like everybody else is not a problem in itself. It's not a problem in itself. Most people are like most people. This is true. And again, most people are like most people. Most people are that average. Nothing wrong with that. The question is whether or not it's something that you actually accept of it yourself. We look at this distinction between truth and belief. And it says here that Nietzsche is an existential philosopher. He would be pretty angry if I called him a philosopher. Nietzsche would probably want to fight me if I called him a philosopher, actually physically. Nietzsche was like that. He hated the idea of being a philosopher. To him, philosophers were people who just use words to argue about words. It didn't actually do anything. He believed that philosophy, if it was proper, it would actually guide you and direct you, and it should do something. In other words, if you have a belief in something and you think it's true, well, you'd have to actually seek it out first to find out if it's true. People go to for example, I'll meet people who go to church, and you'll see they say they go to church, but it's got nothing to do with their actual life. You sit there and go, well, these two things just don't seem to fit. Do you actually believe the things that you? A friend of mine one time told me that Christians don't lie; they just go to church on Sunday and they sing lies. In other words, there's a worship that goes on, but you worship not with your lives, though. And so if this is me, I have to sit there and ask myself, why did I bother doing this one day? What's the thing that I'm deluding myself about? What did I actually believe? And once you figure out what you actually believe, then you can actually live for it. If you believe the things that you're going to sit down and sing about well, then you can actually believe it. And if you don't, then stop doing it and do the thing that you actually do think is true. But figuring out what's true is difficult. 1 + 1 is 2. That's easy. That's easy. But the other things that flow from that, the world around us, becomes so difficult. And like I asked that question, why is it that people will run away from the truth? You've heard this before, right? The truth hurts. People say the truth hurts. Maybe. If the truth hurts, by the way, that tells you something really important about yourself. Okay, do walls hurt? Is anybody being hurt by the wall right now? Okay, good. Probably the answer to that probably is no. But if you go running headfirst into the wall, will the wall hurt? Yeah. Walls are good. Walls don't hurt if you use them for the purposes for which they're designed. A wall is going to keep out the hot, it's going to keep out the sun, it's going to keep out the cold, it's going to keep out the rain, it's going to keep out the fog, it's going to keep us comfortable, it's going to block out sound if we have the door closed. The walls are very good if you use them for the purposes for which they're designed. But if you go running headfirst into the wall, you shouldn't walk away and just like, man, walls hurt. It's because you're not using it for the purpose for which it was designed. Does the truth hurt? I guess if you fight against it. If you go running headfirst against it, try to break down the truth, yeah, of course the truth is going to hurt. You try to deny it. But the truth is good if you use it for the purposes for which it was designed. If we allow it to guide us, if it's the thing that we're actually going to seek, well, then it can't hurt you. All it can do is correct you. And then once you're corrected, there's a joy that's there. It's like, wow, okay, I'm on the right side of truth again. All right, let's get back to life. But we spend so much time trying to avoid this, and especially when we look at our actions and what they actually say about us. When we talk about people being like religious hypocrites, shouldn't bother us if that's not us. People talk about like silliness of atheism. Shouldn't bother us if that's not us. It only bothers us if we feel like we're being personally attacked by those things. But if you're on the side of truth, it shouldn't. It kind of tells us that maybe we're not so certain about this. So how do you figure out what's true? Well, it's hard. It's difficult. It takes a lot of effort. And by the way, it leads to a type of, it does lead to a difficulty in life because then you stand by your beliefs. And then that's admirable. People we admire people who stand by their beliefs. But if you don't have any beliefs, that's the alternative, then you don't really stand by anything. And then life is just kind of like there's nothing that guides you or directs you in life. And so, in this case here, notice that Nietzsche is not necessarily making a criticism of it. He's just saying that there are these two types of people. There are types of people who want to know. And even if you feel like, yeah, there's truth, and this is what people usually mean when they say that truth is relative. They mean that we all view truth differently. In other words, that desk, it's there. Whether you accept it or not, that desk is there. And you might say, well, I don't believe that it is. Well, if he picks up the desk and he hits you with it, you certainly will believe that it's there. The same way that if you go running headfirst into the wall, you're going to realize that the wall is there. And so we can either accept the truth, which means we have to seek it first, or we can reject it. But rejecting the truth means to reject being on the side of the universe, because the universe is itself truth. And so I won't say a lot more about it. But all he's doing here is he's not making a criticism. He's just dividing the world and saying there are these two types of people. Those who want to know stuff, no matter where it leads you. And those who want to believe things, because we think it's comfortable. Not necessarily, but we think that it is. So, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticism, critiques? Neat.